The first presenter is Dr. Jeffrey Kaplan. The title of Dr. Kaplan's talk is Writing as Self-Discovery, Exploring Your Voice in a Community of Learners.
When Dr. Semilaski asked me to talk today about writing, I said there's lots of things you could say. But one of the most important things I think possibly to say is that writing helps you discover your voice. For many of you, your high school experience was associated with all kinds of ideas and associations that came with the notion of writing. Some of you had English teachers that made you write in a formulaic way, and others of you had writing teachers that said, write what you want. But in each of those indications, you found a voice within, something that turned you on to what it means to be a writer. What I do here at the College of Education is help teachers and those aspiring to be teachers work with young people when it comes to teaching of writing. It's a wonderful task and a wonderful job. And the reason it's so wonderful is because one of the first things I do when I work with young people or with older people that are coming back to education to be teachers is to ask them to tell me your story. Tell me what it is that got you to this point. Why did you want to be a teacher? Why did you want to be a teacher of English? Why specifically did you want to be a teacher of English with young people? And their stories vary. They vary every time somebody sits down and says, this is who I am. I was in sales for a long time and I wanted to do something different. I've always wanted to be a teacher, and now's my chance to do that. I've always loved to read. I kept a journal. I write a blog. I do a wiki. Writing, for some reason, is something that we don't talk about because it's easy to say I don't do math, or I don't have a head for science, or I'm squeamish when it comes to the sight of blood. But very few of us are ready to admit that I can't write or I don't read. I'm a deep believer that everybody can write, everybody does write, and everybody has a story. And when you begin to understand that and feel it deep inside of you, then it's just very easy for your story to come out. What I do and what my colleagues do in our teacher education classes, in our English language arts education classes, in our writing workshop, which is offered to graduating seniors, people in the upper advanced senior level, and also graduate students throughout the college campus, is we sit down for a short period of time at the Atlantic Center for the Arts. We do it every summer from June 8th to about June 19th, Monday through Friday. If you've never been to the Atlantic Center for the Arts, I urge you to go there. It's an artist retreat. But they've been gracious enough to allow us to come into that place. And for 2 weeks, we spend with teachers and students, educators and leaders, and sit down and just tell our stories. And when they recognize that their stories will be safe and no one will besmirch their reputation because they've told us one thing or another, then they begin to realize that they have a voice. You always hear the cry from somebody in a national prominence that our students can't write and they can't read, which is never true. Because when students have the opportunity to read and write the things that they want to write, we suddenly realize that they have stories to tell that no one else can tell. And that's what we do in our English language arts education classes. We don't try to make kids who are going to be critical readers in the sense that they're going to become the next critic for a major publication or a national journal. Those things are important and teach us much about what we read and write. But what we really focus on is self-study. Getting each individual in our class, in our schools, in our homes, to tell their own individual stories. When English teachers say, as they sometimes do, don't use the word I in your writing, what you do is you shut down writing. When teachers and lovers of words and reading and writing say you can use the word I in your writing, then suddenly everyone is liberated. Oh, I can talk about the time I went on a summer vacation with my best friend, and by the end of the summer vacation, we weren't such good friends. Or I can talk about the time I gave a speech in front of my class, and I was scared to speak, but by the end of the speech, I felt better about who I was. So much of what happens in public schools and in universities at times is we worry about the what and not the that. And by that I mean we worry about what people are reading and what they're writing and what they're saying, as opposed to the fact that they actually are reading and writing and doing the things that make them a part of our world. Louise Rosenblatt, a distinguished educator who lived to the ripe age of 100, fought to her dying day to say that schools should become a haven or a place where children learn to live inside a democracy. And writing and reading and speaking and sharing are so much about that. In our Writers' Workshop, we provide a safe haven for teachers who are actually working in the public schools and teachers who want to be working in the public or private setting to come and tell their stories about their students. And the reason we do that is we want them to share in their own voice what Louise Rosenblatt was talking about so eloquently during her 100 years, about what it's like to live inside a classroom as a model of democracy. And when they share their stories towards self-discovery, when they say, this is who I am, and this is what I'm all about, then slowly but surely they develop their voice. And as they develop their voice, they realize that writing is not a drudgery, but a thing of pleasure. And they share stories that become their life. The one thing I want to leave you with in this brief panel discussion is that writing is a process of self-discovery, and finding your voice begins with the courage to tell the truth about who you are. And then everything else, form and style and diction, comes with that. Because think about the things that you're attracted to. Whether they're movies or books or short stories or television programs or things you see on the internet. What you're really attracted to are characters. Strong, believable, credible, engaging characters. People you want to spend time with. People you want to return to. If it's a television series or an internet series or a movie or a book or a short story or a professor or a teacher or an educator, and you want to be with that person, you want to surround yourself with what they have to say and what they have to give to you as an individual, you're really interested in their life story. How it is they got there, why they got there. And the more you know, the more you feel a kinship to your own self. So at our writing workshop, in the spirit of Louise Rosenblatt and Maxine Green and Elliot Eisner, two other educators who believe deeply in the arts to transform our lives, we not only write about ourselves, but we share of ourselves in a circle, a community of learners. So that each individual in that workshop or that writing situation feels comfortable enough to share who they are in the company of others. Because writing is not hard. Everyone in this room can write and tell their story. What's really hard is sharing that story. Sharing it aloud. Sharing with others. Speaking about uncomfortable truths and moments that moved you. In closing, my only thoughts about writing is that everybody can do it. Everybody has a voice. Everybody has the desire. Because each and every day when you wake up, you start writing inside your head. You write about the things that matter most to you inside your head. You think of people you want to tell stories to, or tell a joke, or share an aside. And then when you verbalize those thoughts on paper, everybody knows. I love the age in which we're living because of the internet. True, there are things on the internet that nobody wants to see, but there are things on the internet 99% of the time where people share their voices, and everybody can share. Some of you in this room grew up in an age where there were only 3 television stations and only 2 really worked. And then one day you woke up and discovered that the world had exploded. And people you never knew suddenly had a voice. That's a wonderful thing. You can create your own voice, your own wiki, your own blog, and tell your own story. You can self-publish and create a YouTube channel. You can change the world. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Dr. Alicia Janowski, who is a lecturer in the Department of Psychology here at UCF. Her title is Why You Should Not Avoid Writing Classes.
I was excited when I got this invitation to speak because I am a product of the Florida University system, not UCF, just to be clear. But my undergraduate degree looked very similar to how classes are at UCF, where I came from what I thought was a large high school in the South Florida area, thousands and thousands of students, and then I got to my first college class, and it was hundreds and hundreds of students in one room. And I quickly figured out, once I finished my Gordon Rule requirement, I never had to write another word ever except for my name and to bubble in. At the time, we used social security numbers. And that was it. If I could bubble A through D, I too could have a college degree. And then I decided to go to graduate school. And I went to graduate school. I consider myself inbred because I went to the same university for my graduate degree as my undergraduate degree, and the same people who let me get a degree with never writing a word suddenly expected me to be able to write. A lot. I was like, where's my Scantron? And they, laughed. Loudly, actually. And it was just kind of a culture shock. And then I got into the real world, and I realized that I had never been formally trained to write for myself. I got grades on stuff I wrote, but no one ever, even in high school, really taught me how to write. They all kept saying, oh, it's a skill, you can learn it, but no one ever taught it. And then I got into my degree area, and there was some remedial comments made to help shift my writing into what was appropriate in APA style versus MLA, better ways to express ideas to a professional audience. But again, no one ever really sat down and said, here's how you write. And then when I got into a professional world, not only did I have to write to my professional peers, but now I needed to be able to write memos and lots of administrative kind of emails. And again, no one ever really taught me to do this so much as I would get feedback on it and start to make adjustments. And now that I teach, what I see is, because I teach both math courses and psychology content courses, people will tell me very comfortably, I don't do math. Just FYI, in my math classes. But they'll also tell me, oh, there's writing in this class, I'm gonna withdraw. Because they too can maneuver their way through the degree without ever really having to write. And even when I've asked students to just write their opinion, something simple. What do you think of Freud? You might not be a psych major, but you all know who he is. And if I asked you for one word that described him, you would tell me, what did he talk about? Sex. And he did some coke. And that's the opinion you would have. I've actually gotten opinions that were plagiarized. And when I've asked those students, like, dude, I found this at about.com. Why? They were so nervous that their opinion would be wrong, that the idea they were trying to share would be graded incorrectly. And when I've sat down and said, this is your opinion. Your opinion can't be wrong. And I've asked them, what is your opinion? I think he was a quack. Like, that's right. What's wrong with saying that? Well, you're going to get mad because you're a psychologist. I don't care. But people get nervous about it. There's a fear of writing. There's a fear of putting it out there. And I'll see the same students who will write things on the internet in comment sections that are not necessarily very nice, but very clearly opinionated. But there's something different about when you think there's a grade associated with it, I think. There's that fear factor of I'm going to get negative feedback, that I'm going to get a bad grade, and that's going to really impact my GPA, and that's going to impact my ability to take those next steps into the professional world I want to be a part of. And what I would encourage you to realize is at some point, you are going to be accountable for that. Whether it's, hey, we want a writing sample when you apply to graduate school, whether it's you need to write a personal statement when you apply for a job, at some point, you're going to have to write something. So the more opportunities you give yourself to experience that kind of writing, different kinds of writing. Yes, you're going to have to write a research paper. I'm sorry, you're probably going to have to go through college and write a research paper if you haven't already done so. And you're going to love it. It's going to be great. And you're not going to ask, how long does this have to be? You're just going to be like, oh, I could write about this for chapters, or at least 500 words. Try to also do things that encourage you to write down what your opinions are in a way that maybe is meant to persuade somebody who might have a different opinion. Because if you want to go into sales, if you want to go into politics, if you want to go into business, you're going to come up against people who have different opinions. And just saying the things you would write at the end of an article on the internet, that's stupid, is not going to work. So you have to learn different professional ways to express your voice, to express your I, and to tell your story. And sometimes that's really specific, and it's discipline specific. And you'll go through some of your classes and you'll be an MLA expert. I know how to do this. And then you'll get to another class that says, oh, sorry, no. Now you have to write in this different way. But that's all semantics. That's all learning where to put your comma, if you're allowed to use I or not. And if you can't use I, how to still express an opinion without having to rely on that particular vowel. And that it's okay. As a psychologist, if I want to do research, then my research is my opinion and my idea. And I will say that I find it, even to this day, much easier to teach, to express the ideas of others. I can talk about Freud all day. You want to tell me he was an idiot? Okay. I can talk about that too. But it's different when I present my own research and my own ideas, because there is something that feels like there's a value judgment. Is someone going to listen to me and say, oh, that doesn't sound like something I care about? But I promise somebody will. Somebody else is going to care about what it is you say. And you have to learn the best way to express it. So when you take those classes, just like when you see the words group work and your gag reflex kind of kicks in a little bit, I'm going to have to do something with other people. I'm going to have to write with other people. Your life outside of the hallowed halls of UCF is going to involve that. Unless maybe you're a blogger. You're eventually going to have to work with other people. You're going to have to write with other people. You're going to have to express your opinion to other people in a way that's not verbal. And sometimes you don't even know what your opinion is until you start to write it. And I know one of the things that you all have taught me through your office is writing to think is an important skill too. And I think even when you write something privately, there are moments where you're afraid to write it down because someone might see it if you threw it out and not think what your opinion was valid, but your opinion is valid, so you have to practice. So take those courses, take the feedback. Even if you get a perfect score, still look at the feedback that you're given, because it might be, yeah, this was really good, you made all the points on the rubric, but here's how to make it better. Here's how to improve for next time. That's the other thing I see with a lot of my students is I'll ask them, did you look at the feedback from last time? No. Why not? Well, I got a B. And I got a B. It's nice that you wrote these words, but I didn't read them. Your teachers are here to help you. They're here to help you meet whatever goals you have for yourself. So take a look at it, even if it's just to improve your grade in that class, but maybe it'll also help you improve your grade in the next class you go into. What you learn about how to write for history can help you in writing for your psychology teacher. Maybe me, hopefully. I'll see some of you in class someday. But that would be what I would leave you with, is you can certainly make it through your education writing very, very little, depending on your major, of course. But try not to. Because if you don't think you're going to be having to write later in life, you will. Even when you write your teachers, think about your audience. Think about what you're trying to express. Think about the best way to persuade them to come around to your way of thinking. Because we prefer that too than lots of acronyms. FYI, I couldn't come to class because my BF was in the ER. It's just writing things out in a different way for different audiences will help at some point.
Our third presenter is Dr. Daniel Murphy. The title of Dr. Murphy's presentation is Little Debbie, Finding Writing Inspiration in Unexpected Places.
I wanted to actually piggyback off what Alicia was saying in the sense that this is something to think about as far as writing. I've written my whole life, but the older I get, the more I write. And that's never how I envisioned it as a student or before. In fact, I'm a historian by training. I got my degree, my PhD in history. And I teach history and I write about history, but as I get older, I teach history and write history less, but write about everything else a lot more. Which every day I wake up and I'm like, really? Is this really what's happening? But it's not a bad thing, but it's something that you have to look forward to in your futures. You will all write a lot. You all write different ways, but you all write as a permanent part of your life. Now, as far as I'm concerned, first of all, I'm a historian, so I write history books. I write articles about history. I write book reviews about other books. I'm an assistant editor of the Florida Historical Quarterly. I'm a book review editor. So I send people books to write reviews about, and then I edit them in terms of their writing. I edit articles that other people have turned in to be published in the journal. Editing and writing are a little different. In fact, if you want a lot of tears and sorrowful tales, at some other point I can tell you about editing other people's work for publication. But it's rewarding in that it makes me a better writer by looking at other people's writing. I was involved in the WAC program, where some of the people you know, some of the people sitting up here, taught me a great deal about writing that I had never picked up along the way, and it helped me become a better teacher of writing in my history classes. As a faculty fellow, I'm writing different opinion pieces about UCF faculty as public intellectuals, the debates between STEM and non-STEM that are ongoing on our campus and elsewhere. These are things I never envisioned writing about when I got a degree in history long ago. But events like this emphasize or show me how big a deal writing is in my life. Or another way to say it is, the older I get, writing, I never lack a motivation for writing. The different things I write about actually motivate themselves in a lot of different ways, though I know some students have issues with motivations for writing. So one thing I did want to talk about today is a little bit of my past in terms of writing and how I got to this. And I hope it's an inspirational tale, but some of you may see it as the opposite. But yes, okay, she's behind me. How many of you have heard of Little Debbie? Okay, I'm going to say half, maybe half of you. Okay. Little Debbie unexpectedly played a big part in my life long ago, way back in the 20th century. When I graduated with my BA in history in 1993, I planned to go to graduate school in history. However, I did not have money to go to graduate school, which some of you probably are encountering or will encounter. So I figured I'll just get a job for a year that'll help me bank a lot of money, and then I can go to graduate school and not have to pay anything. First mistake, that I thought that. When I went out looking for jobs, believe it or not, there was not a great demand for a BA in history in the places I was looking. My two options ended up being I could sell vacuum cleaners door to door, and who doesn't want to do that? Or I could take a job at the Little Debbie processing plant. that at this time, or the one I ended up working at, was in Collegedale, Tennessee, which is very close to Chattanooga, Tennessee. Well, I'm not really big on cleaning. I don't really like vacuums, so I took the Little Debbie job. Now, this was something I'd never done before. First of all, I was familiar with Little Debbie. I had eaten Little Debbie snack cakes before, and I think, yes, notice it's S-N-A-K. All right, so spelling issues, but they have their reasons. Okay. I went to this job, again, because I didn't have any options, and what my job was, so I walk into this plant. It's this big, humongous plant. In fact, believe it or not, Little Debbie has a lot of security precautions. Not just anybody can get into the Little Debbie plant. You have to have an ID, you have to have verified references. They have gates you have to go through. And remember, this is all pre-9/11 stuff. So it's very strange. I had to show ID to get into a snack cake making factory. But I did it every day. And my job, what my job became was, I was supposed to go deal with the truckers, the guys that distributed snack cakes across the country. And there were many of them. There are hundreds of them. With an operation like this, you always have to be, they call it shipping cakes. You're always shipping cakes. You ship them to Florida, you ship them everywhere. Okay, very, very big deal. A core component of this industry. But my job, what's a good word to say, was problematic. It was problematic because me, BA in history, I guess I was in my mid-20s at that point, showing up in my blazer and tie, was supposed to find out why some of these truck drivers, these truckers, came back to the plant missing some of their cakes. Or, I was kind of the narc. I was kind of the guy that was supposed to find out, well, you know, you left with 800 and you came back and you're supposed to have 50 left, you didn't have any. What's your problem? Now, in case you haven't noticed, I'm not the biggest guy in the world. And not to stereotype truckers, though I did at that time, they were really big guys. They were really big guys, they were burly guys, a lot of them had been doing it a long time, and they were less than enthused when I came up to them and said, hey man, where are the cakes you're supposed to have? So it was a very intimidating job. But what this intimidation did is it made me really, really, really want to go to grad school. Really, really, really want to go to grad school. So one of the things I started doing in my spare time when I was not hassling truck drivers about the cakes they did or did not have was write. And Little Debbie was often the subject of my writings. Now I'd show you some of these writings, but I'd probably get arrested because of the profanity and some of the pledges I made at that time about what I was going to do to Little Debbie or at Little Debbie or to people that worked at Little Debbie. But here's the thing, it was a motivation. It was a motivation that made me embark on a career where, like I said, I write more than I ever have. And I probably would have anyway. I would have figured out a way to get the money. I may have sold vacuums, that may have been cool, I don't know, I've never done it. I would have gotten to grad school. But I don't think I would have ever had that perspective on the importance of writing. Now, to finish this tale, as it turns out, truckers are pretty cool. Many of them sympathized. I'd come up to them and I'd say, hey, I need to know where those 6 cakes are, and they're like, well, I'm not going to tell you that, but I do feel sorry for what you're having to do. And as it turned out, many of these guys were budding, hidden intellectuals, some of the smartest guys I'd ever known before. They had a perspective on life I'd never had, still don't have. And in fact, some of them actually did start to do better with the cakes that they were taking out and bringing back. But that's not so much the point. The point is, if you have a problem finding an inspiration for your writing or a direction you want to go with your writing, you can find inspirations in very unexpected places. Did I think that 20 plus years after I had worked at Little Debbie, I'd still be talking about Little Debbie? No. All I thought at the time I got from Little Debbie was an intimidating work environment and an expanding waistline. Because the cool thing about Little Debbie is they gave you all the cakes you could eat, so which I did, and many people did. A lot of people left there because they ate too many cakes there. I'm not saying to follow my path, but you might follow a similar path. And if at the time it seems like something, wow, this is not what I thought I'd be doing, it may pay dividends in the future. Or it may inspire you to do something completely different. And at the core of it, at least in my case, and undoubtedly in yours, one way or another, will be the writing process.
Well, as the panel's moderator, I think I'm supposed to ask the first question if nobody else wants to ask questions, right? So I'll go ahead. So, Dan, any of those truck drivers, did they write anything?
It's interesting. Some of them did. There were a couple of poets in the group. Think about truck drivers. They spend a lot of time by themselves, a lot of time to think, and that's why I think you can make a case. That's how you become an intellectual, is just drive a truck around and think all the time. It was interesting. They were always reluctant to show me what they wrote, and I think they thought, well, he's a college kid. But I regret it, because I wish they would have, because I'm sure there would have been things I would have really been impressed with. But I won't say it frequently, but at least every other month I probably think about one of those guys and something they told me that I learned from them that factors into my writing.
My question is for Dr. Murphy. Did it come to you like spontaneously to just write down your feelings when you were working at Little Debbie's, or was that like something that you had done before? What was the thought process behind it?
That's a great question. And thought process, I don't know, it was more of an emotive process, I think. Because what would happen is I'd usually do it on the afternoons. I'd get back to the office, which, by the way, was a converted closet. Okay, it's just a high life I was living at this time in many ways. But I'd get in there, and it was almost like it was a cathartic thing, because, like I said, most of these guys were pretty cool to me, but it was still kind of an intimidating thing to walk out, hey, man, where are your cakes? And so I was a little unnerved by it. And then I'd come back, and, didn't have a lot of outlets. I could eat another cake, or I could write something. And so I'd write, and it would be scribbles. It would be stuff I'd typically, throw away. But it did kind of become a habit. And it's a habit that, one way or another has continued. It's the kind of thing now when I don't have to write anything formally, like a article or anything like that, I kind of get this, it's almost like this urge, like I need to write something. And so I'll return to what I did then. I'll just scribble something down. I'll either throw it away, or I'll come back the next day and go, what were you thinking? This is awful, and I'll throw it away. But it's still something that kind of helps me, I guess, in times when I'm not doing anything else in terms of writing.
I see a lot of people do that on Facebook, right? I mean, it seems kind of similar, where, oh my God, this person's driving me bonkers, and you start like hashing out your idea and hit send, but in a more formalized way.
Yeah, and of course, I'm dating myself, but back in the 20th century, we didn't have Facebook, so I didn't have that option. So maybe it would be different. It probably would be different for you guys just because of the different forums. And that's one of the beauties of writing today, I think, for you guys, is you have forums, various forums you can write in that some of us never had at the same point. You have Facebook, you have Twitter, you have a lot of different things where not only can you write, but you can get feedback for your writing. And I think that's an unbelievable resource or tool you guys have.
My question's for Dr. Kaplan. The other two panelists told us their stories. What's your story and how did you end up in
Sorry, you have to stand up and speak louder. I can't hear you.
Could you tell us your story and how you ended up in this field?
How did I what?
What is your story? How did you end up in your field?
Oh. This is all I've ever done. I've never had a real job. I was a counselor at a camp. I was a usher at a movie theater. I lasted a couple of weeks. I got tired of seeing the same movie over and over again. And then I found a summer camp, and I fell in love. I fell in love with my wife. My wife I met at a summer camp. We've been married over 40 years. And I fell in love with the fact that every day I could be who I wanted to be. I mean, there's a great commercial on television that says, do what you love and save your money. I've never found any better advice than that. Do what you love and save your money. If you do that, you'll live a wonderful and prosperous life, and to give more than you receive. I just fell in love with teaching. I majored in theater. I knew I didn't have the quality to be a Broadway actor or a movie star, but I knew that every classroom I walked into would be a stage, and the students I worked with would be more than happy to share their stories.
And writing in English provides me with that. So it was just a natural transition from counseling to teaching.
How do you transfer a subject that you're interested in to a research paper?
How to transfer your subject into
The subject you're interested in to a research paper.
Oh, good. A great question. How do you transfer the subject you love into a research paper? The first thing you do is you find out why you love that subject. And then you read everything you possibly can on that subject. And then you sit down at a computer and just pour your heart out. Peter Elbow, one of the great teachers of writing that I admired, created something based on his last name called elbow writing, which I'm sure both of these distinguished panelists will agree is that you just write your heart out. That's not your finished product. That's your thoughts on hyperspeed. And then when you're done, you look at it and say, okay, what here can I use? Can I shift it into paragraphs that make sense? But you start with what you love. These two people love psychology and they love history and they love it more than they possibly can tell. I love words and papers and the expression of emotions. And then everything you do is an expression of your feelings. Books are expressions of your feelings. Television shows you watch. You find your passion. You read everything you possibly can on your passion. You sit down at a computer, pour your heart out about everything you've read and heard, and then you look at it and say, how can I shape this into something that really means something? Maybe there's a question. Maybe there's something you want to explore in depth. And then gradually you begin to shape it. And that's how you develop a research paper, and that's how everything got started. Think of the people that have taken risks and created wonderful things. They started with their passion. You can't do anything unless you really believe in it. And that's why I've always said I love working at a university, because everybody here has fought for an idea. No high school guidance counselor ever turned to these two people and said, "Here's a great job. Become a college professor," because they're few and far between. But they followed their passion, and now they're here.
Well, we're out of time. Thank you very much.